Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating and honestly pretty provocative philosophical framework by an author named Feng. We're going to dive into a text that essentially attempts to connect the hard, unbreakable scientific laws of the universe directly to human destiny. It's this wild conceptual journey that blends physics, math, and some really profound questions about fate. So let's just get right into it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt completely out of control of your own life path? Like you're just a passenger along for the ride? We've all had those moments where we're forced to do things we don't want to do, or deal with people we'd really prefer to avoid. Well, this framework asks us to consider a radical idea. What if your destiny isn't just up to chance? What if it's actually a strict mathematical certainty, following a completely predetermined script? Section 1. The illusion of control. To really get this, we first need to look at our own perception of reality. The author points out this universal human frustration with just how chaotic life appears on the surface. Take a look at these paradoxical examples directly from the text. We see a divine messenger washing toilets, God nailed to a cross, billionaires literally starving to death, foolish people ruling as emperors, while incredibly hardworking people are stuck living in poverty. On the surface, this just looks like a completely random, unfair, and chaotic world, right? But here is exactly where Feng pivots. Looking at all of this apparent chaos, the text draws a really striking conclusion. There is no one to condemn and no one to praise. And why is that? Because, according to the author, if you were placed in the exact same background and circumstances as any of those people, whether it's the foolish emperor or the struggling worker, you would do the exact same things. It completely removes personal blame and praise, attributing all our actions to forces way beyond our individual choices. Section 2. Defining universal constants. So, if we aren't the ones in control, what is? Well, before we can understand human destiny, we really have to look at the scientific rules that govern the universe. The author grounds this whole spiritual idea in hard science. A constant is defined here as a quantification, a law of repeated operations, and a universal invisible phenomenon. Think of math with pi or the golden ratio. Think of physics with the gravitational constant or chemistry with boiling points. These constants establish an undeniable, unbreakable order in the natural world. And this brilliantly illustrates the core thesis of the entire text. The author takes that hard science definition and creates a totally new one, the life constant. The logic is, if constants are a universal phenomenon, then life itself must also have them. These are predetermined quantifications of biological limits and personal experiences that absolutely cannot be changed by human desire or effort. I mean, physical death is an obvious one, right? You can't just wish it away. But the author takes this concept much, much further. Section 3. The constants of life. Now we're moving from the abstract physics lab right into your everyday life. The crucial point is that this framework bridges the gap between obvious biological facts and highly personal life events. Sure, you have a set number of bones, but according to the author, you also have a predetermined constant number of breaths and pulse beats in your lifetime, and it doesn't stop at biology. Look at this list: the amount of wealth you'll accumulate, your romantic luck, whether you'll travel abroad or live in a villa, or even how high of an official rank you might achieve. The text claims all of these are as mathematically certain as the fact that humans have two legs. To demonstrate this absolute, unshakable belief in fatalism, the author shares a pretty controversial personal anecdote in the text. He actually recounts visiting Kamloops Hospital during the COVID-19 pandemic and straight up refusing to wear a mask. His stated creed is stark. If your constant dictates you're supposed to die, a mask won't save you. If you're not supposed to die, you could literally be immersed in a tank of viruses and you'd survive. Now, we are just explaining the source material here, but it perfectly highlights the extreme extent of this deterministic philosophy. The author's logic for that hospital anecdote is tied directly back to mathematical constants. The argument is that if human destiny could simply be altered by a piece of cloth, like if we could change the outcome through our own free will, then the universe's foundational laws would be fundamentally unstable. It'd be like the mathematical constant of pi just suddenly and randomly deciding to change from 3.14 to 3.2. And since pi cannot randomly change, neither, the author argues, can your destiny. Section 4. The universe's balance mechanism. This brings us to a really fascinating question. What enforces these constants? How does the universe keep the math in check? Well, it all comes down to a giant zero. The text shifts focus here to the active force of energy conservation. We all know energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? The author applies this directly to human behavior. stating that the sum of all positive and negative energy in the universe must always perfectly equal this equilibrium point, 0. Anything that swings too far to an extreme must be pulled back. Let's actually see this in action with some stark contrasts provided by the author. This perfectly illustrates the karmic mechanism. If you push the equation too far to the left, say you enjoy too much when you're young, the universe is forced to balance the equation back to 0. The result? You will inevitably suffer when you're old. An extreme action in life demands an equal and opposite reaction. Here's another one. If you talk too much, the universe's undeniable balancing act is triggered, and eventually circumstances will align to quite literally force you to shut up. It's this natural rhythm of excessive behavior immediately setting the stage for its own downfall. And a final warning from the author on this balancing mechanism. If you eat too much, indulge in rich food, and waste it, the pendulum is going to swing back. One day, you will go hungry or even starve. If you accumulate too much wealth or power, the universe will force you to, as the author puts it, spit it all back out in the form of suffering just to bring your life's equation back to absolute 0. Section 5. Escaping the constraints. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. This all sounds incredibly rigid and, honestly, pretty bleak. Is there any hope of getting out of this? Well, initially, the text makes it seem totally impossible. According to the author, no one is exempt from this universal math. Not humans, not divine beings, not gods, and not Buddhas. They're all constrained. The text even points out Saddam Hussein as an example, noting that despite his massive worldly power as a military commander, he was unexpectedly hanged. He couldn't dodge his life's constant, proving that worldly power means absolutely nothing to universal mathematics. But, actually, there is a loophole. Zufeng does offer an ultimate proposed solution for escaping this rigid mathematical destiny through a 3-step path. Step 1, follow the way of nature. Basically, align yourself with the universe rather than fighting it. Step 2, practice absolute selfless dedicating and giving. By removing yourself and your selfish desires, you stop creating those energetic extremes that force the universe to balance you out. And through this, you reach step 3, you can finally transcend the constraints of these constants altogether. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to wrap up the explainer today. If this framework is correct, if all your absolute worst hardships and your most massive successes are nothing more than the universe coldly balancing its equation back to 0, how does not change your perspective on things? How will you choose to spend your next potentially predetermined breath? It's a really profound question about the interplay between our deeply felt sense of free will and the invisible mathematics of the universe. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpacked this incredible source text, and as always, keep seeking to understand the ideas that shape our world.